Hello, everybody. I'm Ralph Tyko with the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network, and I have the privilege of introducing old-time baseball history and trivia with co-host David Nemec and Alan Blumkin. How you doing, guys? You have a show.
Great, Ralph. How have you been?
All right. Welcome to the network. Welcome to your show. And I'm here for the first time just to kind of break you in. Alan, you've been with the network now for a long time, and I call you my Tommy Heinrich, old reliable, and you guys are going to have a terrific show. We have a topic to start it off with. Today we were talking off the air. Alan?
Well, we're celebrating the agreement on the new collective bargaining agreement, which, from what I understand, went to the deadline last night. Both parties signed off on it. It has to be ratified, but it'll be ratified because not that much has changed, and both sides would have lost a fortune, and if there had been some sort of labor problem. So one of the things that they put in yesterday, which is something that I've been against ever since they started doing this, was they eliminated the home field advantage going to the winning league of the All-Star game. There was a situation, especially 5 years ago, where Texas won the American League. They had won a division, and the Cardinals were a wild card. And the Cardinals got the home field advantage because the National League had won the All-Star game. I thought that was extremely unfair. So hopefully, this thing is gone and we don't have to discuss it anymore.
Yeah, we're going to discuss it one more time.
Yeah, one more time.
Because I was delighted by the decision when we talked off the air. And,
I'm opposed to it.
David, were you too, David?
I'm definitely opposed to it. I like it gives the All-Star game some meaning. Otherwise, it's purely an exhibition game, and managers are free to do whatever they want, and there are no consequences really. But with that extra little fillip in there, it makes you want to save somebody out of the bullpen in the late innings. You don't throw them in too early. A good closer. You want to save a good pinch hitter for the last inning, maybe, and you don't just run your bench, willy-nilly. You have to do a little bit of planning to try to win the game.
Yeah, but the whole idea of the All-Star game is to show off all the players.
Well, you can do both. You can play everybody and still.
It's one inning now. It's not like the old days when it started would go.
Yeah.
All 3 innings.
You had pitchers going six innings sometimes, and even almost a complete game in the earlier days in the 30s.
Not now. Well, now regular season they don't go more than 4 or 5 innings.
Okay, let me ask you guys something about the agreement that's coming to fruition, because they've got to get it done, or all bets are off.
It's done.
It's completely done?
Yeah.
Okay.
Only
that is
to ratify it, which they will because of the money involved.
Okay, I'm almost, because I live in a small team market, in quotes. It's not a small team. It's not a small team market. It's the Oakland area, but they qualify as a small team and qualify for the luxury tax because of their antiquated stadium and their situation. That said, what happened with the luxury tax? Was it discontinued as well?
No.
Modified?
Now it's going to remain the same, okay? But there's going to be increases in the coming years.
But it's going to go to the teams that are in small team markets.
Unfortunately,
just as before. They were talking about eliminating.
The one solution is the hard salary cap, and the players will never agree to that.
Okay, so the luxury tax continues.
Yes.
Okay,
which
means
that
minimum
wage goes up incrementally in the next few years also. The minimum wage next year is going to be $535,000.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Which means that coaches make about that much as well.
Yeah, that's what an old law professor of mine used to call for the sick, sore, lame, and disabled.
Okay. That's a little bit. Would you explain that?
Well, basically, rookies who come in the first year from the start are entitled to $535,000 a year, and you've seen some of these contracts that have been signed already this year, like the Marlins giving Edinson Volquez, who was awful last year, 22 for 2 years. The Texas giving Andrew Kashner, who was 5-11 with a 5.25 ERA, something like $7.5 million for next season. And again, as Bill Veeck said 40 years ago when the whole thing started, it's not the high cost of stardom; it's the high cost of mediocrity.
Right. Right. You could almost understand a guy who puts butts in the seats and this, that, and the other thing.
Yeah, with them having 30 teams out, the talent is spread fairly thinly, and players can hang around on the margins for playing for 10 or 15 teams, and if they get released by somebody, there's a good chance that somebody else will pick them up.
Well, we disagree. We've talked about this before. We disagree that the talent is spread any more thinly than it ever was, because now we have an influx of Dominicans and Puerto Ricans and, Chinese, everybody. It's worldwide. So we're drawing talent. Even though there's more teams, there's more talent to be drawn from.
Well, we're losing African Americans because basically they go into football and basketball where there's no minor league apprenticeship.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
Yeah. And a sad point at that. I never heard it expressed that way. No minor league apprenticeship.
No, the minor league apprenticeship in basketball and football is college.
Oh, right. Now I understand the analogy. So these are kids coming from...
They go directly, if they have the talent and the ability, they go directly from the college football to the NFL and college basketball to the NBA.
Right. But why should African Americans then be under this? Why do you use it in reference to African Americans?
Well, basically because one of the things with basketball, especially, you don't need space. All you need is a hoop and a basketball. You don't need equipment. You don't need gloves, spikes, uniforms, bats.
That part I understand.
Space.
That part I understand. But okay, I heard that the reason I was always led to believe that the reason that there are fewer African Americans playing is that scouts just don't want to go to places like to scout kids in really, really tough neighborhoods.
Well, also.
They're usually scouting kids who are, high school or, they're really not playing in neighborhood fields anymore. Most of the, even, the high schools are playing in fairly elite fields, and the colleges certainly so. So, it's that black kids see more of a future in football and basketball. It's a quicker, you make it quicker. You make it, you spend a year or two in college. You don't have to do particularly well. Just, manage to be eligible. And then, then you're drafted. You're up for up to be drafted by your junior year, and in basketball, you're up to be drafted in your sophomore. You don't have to even come back for a second year. So it's a quick make to go into the big time in basketball and football. Whereas in baseball, you really have to serve an apprenticeship. I mean, you really do. And the kids and the Asian players have already done it. They've played professionally in leagues over there, and the Dominicans, they play year round. They play a lot of ball, so they're ready.
In academies when they're signed very young, at I think age 16.
Well, that's it. But baseball can be very expensive too if you're an American, and that's why blacks stay away from it. To get on a traveling team, there's also it's a matter of connections. It's a matter of your family having the money to spend on you, and the black kids just don't have it. So they get shut out of stuff like that, at a fairly young age, and they gravitate very quickly toward basketball and football.
Excellent explanations.
Basketball.
What else was settled of significance in the player agreement that came down today?
Yeah, everything is settled as outside of the. And they're holding the rosters at 25 because there was a proposal to increase it to 26.
Okay.
And
so apparently there was no real animosity between the
no, I mean,
players.
The papers, because they went into the late hours last night, and they had to write stories about a possible lockout and all this nonsense from 25 years ago when there was tremendous animosity. The atmosphere, I think, has changed on both sides because there's so much money at stake these days. Wanted to get something done as quickly as possible.
Well, that's
I thought that the articles the last few days in the paper about possible lockouts was all BS. It was all media. Media had to fill up papers and the ESPN shows about a possible lockout. I didn't really think that this was going to happen. I said there's too much at stake here. I mean, they're not as crazy as they were, back in the 1890s. The 1990s, and there may have been a proposal. I'm not sure of this that they cut out the draft compensation for Tier 1 free agents or for they lose players after they refuse a tender. So, I mean, there's a lot of tweaking going on, but
right.
For the most part. But they knew they had to get it done in time, and now they can sell the tickets and make all the free agent signings and make all the trades. Supposedly, Andrew McCutchen is going to Washington. And,
was there some talk of him going to the Mets?
No, he's going to Washington. That's supposedly a done deal.
Okay.
And but basically, there's labor peace, and this agreement is for 5 years.
Okay. Are they getting prospects or pitching for him? They desperately need pitching.
The Pirates will hold ball, so that's what they're probably going to get. A constant rebuilding program.
Right. Has to be frustrating.
What are you going to do? It's not. I don't have any control over it.
Yeah, that's a very good way of looking at it. David, let's get to know you a little bit. May I ask the writing process when you write a book on, say, trivia? Do the questions come to mind first, or do the answers come to mind first?
Well, I usually look at the whole player, and you can get some very interesting questions, Ralph, from just looking at the whole player's career and seeing little oddities, and and it generally what'll pop into my mind first is looking at the player and saying, this guy's interesting, and not too much is known about him, but here's something he did that really really fascinates me, and I think it'll fascinate my readers just as much. So let's see if I can frame a question around a particular feat or a particularly interesting year that he had, and I kind of work that way. I don't really, and then in my early trivia books, I would devise each chapter as a particular category, like rookies or MVPs or Triple Crown winners or ERA champ. Yeah, and those were the early books, and and then I'd see where the guy, where the question best fit. And sometimes there could be 2 or 3 choices, and I'd have to rework the question so that it would be a better fit in MVP, say, than in Triple Crown for a particularly big year.
Gotcha. Here's my take on it. Your questions were difficult, yet not impossible.
Well, I'm glad you said that. That's the way I wanted them to be.
Okay. Because that's the way they were. It wasn't you had to put some thought into it, but if you put it together in your head, or you just do that thought process, and the fun is the thought. The fun is thinking about it. So,
and David was
I mentioned this to you on a previous show. We had you on the network. It was my crossword puzzle. Your books were my crossword puzzles back before the internet, when baseball literature wasn't easy to come by, and as Alan pointed out, you were the first one to do this, the first one to see that there was a market there. How did that come about in your head?
Well, I was actually, we talked about this a bit before. I was working as a parole officer, and I was working in a unit where I had a lot of guys who were really fixated on baseball, and they'd throw questions around, mostly related to New York teams, because this was in Manhattan. But and I would bring them out into other cities like Pittsburgh and Detroit, Cleveland, Chicago, and throw questions around. And then, a couple guys actually, that said to me, are you writing any of these questions down? Because these are good questions. We've never heard these and the way you phrase them, I mean, you offer clues, which other trivia people don't. I mean, you give us a chance to get the question just by, examining the clue carefully, and it'll direct us toward a particular team, a particular era, and even sometimes the exact player, if we work the clues right. So I sat down one day, and I remember it was a Saturday. It was in February, and nobody was going outside anyway in New York. It was, and I just sat there and started, at first I started with categories, and then I started putting the questions into various categories, and I realized, hey, I think there probably is a book here. And it really didn't take too much to put the whole book together, Ralph. It was probably a couple or 3 weeks, and I had, basically the book. Then I had to structure it, and I made it into 9 innings, and and I gave credit for grand slam home runs, a triple, a double, depending on the difficulty of the question.
I remember that so well. It was almost like you could play against the book.
You could play against your friends. Against your friends. You could,
Or you could do it solitaire. I remember.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow. And
I started getting, you could figure out your batting average, your slugging average, and I started getting letters. They came through the publisher. They came through actually, my editor, and from guys, and everybody was saying these, the editors in particular was saying these questions are impossible. Nobody can really work on these. I said, no, they're not. You're going to be surprised, Fred, where guys are going to, I think guys are going to write in, and guys did start writing in, and they gave their batting averages and slugging averages, and one guy went over the top. I mean, he hit well over 500 with a slugging average well over 1,000. And this guy, when I got into Sabre later on, I met, and he actually he and I paired off in trivia contests, and he was very, very good. And I think, Al, do you know who I'm talking about?
Scott?
No, it wasn't Scott. It was Dick Kramer.
Dick Kramer, yeah. Yeah, I know him. He's very good, yeah.
Very good. He was very good. And he continues to be very good. And he's our age. He's,
you gave me one of the best compliments I ever received because I started writing them for the National in 2001. And I remember you were competing in that one, and you asked me at the end, were these yours? And I said yes. And he said,
I could pick them out. I could pick out the ones that were Al's.
Yeah, and David said to me, USOB. I said, I only learned from the best. And David was basically my tutor into how to construct and how to write trivia and what not to put in and what to put in.
Wow, it's like talking to it's like talking to Lou Gehrig and Babe Ruth of trivia. For me, it's very cool. So I got one for you guys. You ready?
Yeah.
What was the original cause of the animosity between Jimmy Pearsall and Casey Stengel?
Probably there might have been a couple of remarks that Stengel might have made when Pearsall was going through his breakdown.
Yeah, that wasn't it.
That wasn't it. I remember the break.
They might have had that.
But I'm talking specifically with the Mets.
Oh, he wanted number 37.
Mets.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
37, and Stengel always wore 37, and there was a suggestion that they give Pearsall the number 37A like a racehorse. That'd be like a racehorse. And Pearsall, of course, when he hit the 100th home run when he was at the Mets, ran the bases backwards.
Yeah.
And he was released a day or so after that.
He said,
but you're absolutely correct. And he ended up wearing what number?
Oh, I don't know. I don't remember. I'll have to look that up. But,
all right. It was 34.
34.
But he didn't last long with the Mets, and he went out to Washington, if I'm not mistaken, after that, or maybe before that. I don't know.
Yeah,
but I do know this. We've had a good show, and there's a lot more to come from you, gentlemen.
Yeah,
Thank you.
We were preparing to discuss the St. Louis Browns today.
Oh, then please go on and do.
All right. They came into existence in 1902. They replaced the Milwaukee team, which had finished in the cellar in 1901, and had terrible attendance. And they went in as competition for the National League team, the Cardinals, and did very well their first year. They finished in second place. And it would be as a result, they held out a real carrot to their fans, but it would be a long, long time before they delivered on that carrot. And
the Cardinals were the dregs of the National League in the dead ball era.
Yeah, they were. The teams took turns finishing in last place, and sometimes both would finish in the cellar.
What changed the fortunes of both the Cardinals and the Browns was that Branch Rickey was an employee of the Browns, and they got a new owner who, from the Federal League, when that folded up, named Phil Ball. And Ball and Rickey did not get along. So Rickey went to the Cardinals. The Cardinals became one of the best franchises in the National League, and the Browns went into the sewer.
That's and the Cardinals had played in the rickety park up prior to 1920. Played in the last wooden park, Robeson Field, and then in 1920 the Browns agreed to let them share Sportsman's Park. Little knowing that the Cardinals soon would be the big draw, and they would be, the dregs in the American League for a long time to come.
decent in the 20s, the Browns, but after that,
they were very good in the early
1902.
They came within, they were right up there for the whole season.
Yeah.
The Yankees beat them at the very end.
Yankees in 1937, I think it was, beat them 21 times. 22. One of those seasons.
Yeah, no, they were right down there with the Browns and the A's brought up the rear of the American League year after year in the late 30s.
And when I first started following in the early 50s, the Browns, Senators, and A's did not have AAA farm teams because they couldn't afford it.
Kansas City had.
The Browns had Toledo. They got Toledo, which was an American association.
Washington had Chattanooga and the Southern.
Well, Washington didn't. Yeah, they had a double-A team in Chattanooga, and
the A's may have had Iowa for a little while.
The A's did have a triple-A team, but it was usually a very weak triple-A team, and there's a lot of movement because no team really wanted to be. The A's weren't giving them the teams good prospects, so they would move on to a better parent club if they could.
And the Yankees and specifically the Red Sox stole players from the Browns like Vern Stevens and Ellis Kinder for virtually nothing.
Yeah.
They always had to throw money into those trades because the Browns were living hand to mouth.
Yeah, it was sad because they were always a colorful franchise for me, even as a kid. They had players. They had fascinating players, and of course they had Eddie Goodell for one plate appearance. The only midget ever.
All 1/8.
All number 1/8.
Yeah. Or 1/2, I think. He 1/2. Yeah, 1/2.
And of course, that's a question that I learned from the pitcher, Sugar Kane.
Yeah. You know who he batted for? Eddie Goodell came as a pinch hitter.
I know all that stuff. Frank
Suchet, yeah.
And the umpire was Ed Hurley. The pitcher was Bob Kane. The catch was Bob Swift, and Jim Delsing ran for them.
Yeah.
That's basic stuff. When you're out, that's basic stuff. Like everything.
I would love to have seen that.
Stuff, which brings us to Bill Veeck a little bit. Had to be the most, up with Branch Rickey, who you guys talked about before, most interesting characters in baseball history.
Very. He was, we did talk before about him when he was with Cleveland, and I grew up in Cleveland and, got the full Veeck experience when I was very young. And then I was very sorry to see him move on from the Indians to the Browns. But Veeck welcomed the challenge, among other things. And, he was never really he was never a wealthy owner. And, he would plow a lot of his money back into the team and into the farm system. And, eventually, it was really sad when he left Cleveland because I think the Cleveland teams, although they continued to be very good, they really only won 2 pennants in 48 and 54, whereas if Veeck had stayed, I think they would have won a couple more.
Yeah, absolutely. When he bought the Browns, he said that he knew it was only a one-town team at that city at that point, and he bought the Browns with the specific purpose to run the Cardinals out. And he hired all these old Cardinals like Marty Marion and Harry Burkeen as a pitching coach, and Hornsby is the manager, and finally, in the winter of 1953, the Cardinal owner, Fred Sy, was convicted of income tax evasion, and he sold out. He sold out to the Bush family, Anheuser-Busch, and Veeck said once they made that deal, he knew he was dead in St. Louis.
Yeah.
And the American League wouldn't let him sell out. They tried to bankrupt him. They wouldn't let him sell to move the team to Baltimore unless he sold it to different interests.
Yeah, which is too bad because if he had been allowed to move on his own, Baltimore would have. The
owners hated him because he was, he ruffled their feathers.
Yeah, Yeah.
But he also put people in the seats.
Very staid industry. It's very, very conservative. And
especially the Yankees hated his guts.
Right.
And
these people already made their money, so they're not, and Vic is, struggling, so, yeah.
Well, he proposed that the visiting team share in the gate and sharing the TV money. They were calling him a socialist and a communist. And the Yankees in those years ran the American League the same way that OMalley ran the National League.
Yeah.
So,
there's a new book.
Was that Vic's idea? How did that get through then?
No, it didn't get through until after a lot of these old owners were gone.
Oh, okay.
And there's a new book, biography that came out on Ford Frick, which I'm reluctant to spend $30 for. It's a McFarlane book, and somebody posted this on Facebook in the baseball books group, and I put down it's a league matter, which is what Frick used to say all the time when he refused to make any sort of controversial decision.
It's a league matter.
League matter. So he let OMalley do it in the National League, and Topping and Webb do it in the American League.
Yeah.
He was the one that proposed the asterisk for Maris.
Yeah, because he was a ghostwriter for Babe Ruth for quite a while.
Right. So.
Yeah, I really can't.
The only thing he ever did positive as commissioner, as far as I was concerned, was he was the one who backed the right of Jackie Robinson to play when the Cardinals supposedly threatened to strike.
Well, I didn't know that for sure.
Yeah.
So, it picked up when they moved to Baltimore.
Oh, yeah. Well, it took a while there because they were awful when they moved there. It took a while for them to start. They didn't really become.
1960, they gave the Yankees a pretty good fight.
Yeah,
with the Baby Birds, with Steve Barber and those guys.
Yeah, but it was 1960 when they became,
but it took
Frank Brooks Robinson, and they had Jim Gentile, and they had some pretty good ball players then. But it took a while.
Yeah, it wasn't until '66 that they actually broke through.
The first year there, they won. In 1954, they were 54 and 100, and the reason
they didn't.
The reason they didn't finish last is because the A's, their last year in Philadelphia, were 51 and 103.
Wow.
Yeah.
Hey, can't talk about those Baltimore teams without mentioning Bob Boyd, who, if you lived in New York,
frozen rope.
Yeah.
That guy could really hit.
He was in the Negro Leagues for a number of years before he got into professional.
Yeah, he had that stroke, and he could hit a line single in any direction, and I remember him really well. Yeah,
play with. I'm going to ask you one more question because after I hung up the other day with you, the last time we talked before the holidays, you grew up in Cleveland. There was a movie made with Walter Matthau.
A fortune cookie.
Walter Matthau.
A fortune cookie.
In Cleveland, he was a press photographer for Brown.
Jack Lemmon was a press photographer, and he supposedly got slammed by a football player in Cleveland, and Matthau played the lawyer who was trying to get him a tremendous amount of money.
I never saw that.
I've seen it a number of times. It's a Billy Wilder movie. And I do have a copy.
Football play. I blank on his name. The football player that slammed him.
Yeah, it was based on Jimmy Brown, but this was a guy.
No, it wasn't Jimmy Brown. It was somebody who had a brother who played baseball.
That could be. No, that wouldn't be.
Kid from Cleveland was George Trent.
Alex Johnson's brother.
Yeah.
Johnson played a little pro Not for long.
The Kid from Cleveland, which was made right after they won the '48 World Series.
Yeah, that was. But there were no stars.
Yeah, that movie was pretty bad. Bill Veck thought that all copies of it had been destroyed, and one of the cable stations picked it up. So
yeah.
I videotaped it quite a number of years ago.
Even as a kid, I recognized it was a bad movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, compared to the Babe Ruth story, William Bendix, it was a masterpiece.
Well, yeah.
William Bendix.
The most unconvincing Major League ball player, I think. Well, Gary Cooper was pretty bad, too, as Lou Gehrig. Yeah.
Tony Perkins, we talked about Jimmy Pearsall.
Yeah.
A real favorite of mine.
Well, Tony Perkins, I think Hitchcock saw Perkins all through over twitching.
Didn't Ronald Reagan play Grover Cleveland Alexander? And who played Alexander? And
didn't he play a president somewhere, too?
Yeah.
Ronald Reagan, wasn't he a president somewhere? Didn't he play a role as...
He played Grover Cleveland Alexander.
Yeah, that's what I thought. And I remember that was a bad film. And
Would play Monty Stratton.
You know what the best baseball movie I ever saw as a kid was? Ray Milland, It Happens Every Spring. That was a really fine and entertaining movie.
Yes, it was. But the one with Edward G. Robinson as the manager, you know what that is, Alan.
Angels in the Outfield.
Wow. No. Angels in the Outfield?
The Big Leaguer?
Yeah, the Big Leaguer.
Yeah, I haven't
with
seen
Edward.
That in years.
Yeah, that was $1 million movie 1,000 times when I was a kid, but not
really,
enough.
I've never seen that film. Huh.
Edward G. Robinson is a minor league manager with a replica New York Giant uniform. The NY properly done, the Giants on the front, and it was, as a little kid, it's the wintertime and baseball's not there, and a baseball movie would come on. It would be terrific. It would be, Alan, like when sometimes they broadcast the winter leagues from Santurce. I remember Puerto Rico, and you'd get a game. You'd be sitting home on a Sunday, and all of a sudden you'd see baseball. You couldn't understand the announcers, but you're watching a baseball game in the winter, and that was cool beans. What do you guys do to Jones, Baseball Jones? The season just ended. There's another 3 months.
I'm into football, not as much as I used to be, because I just found myself unable to watch it for any length of time. I follow my Pittsburgh, which is my alma mater. I follow the Post to some extent, and basketball. But I've cut down my basketball watching an awful lot. The only NBA game I watched all season last year from start to finish was the last game between the Warriors and the Cavaliers.
That was quite a game.
Yeah, I do a lot of reading during the off season.
Okay. Yeah, I do too. I do too. I don't really follow the fall leagues or the winter leagues, and I did when I was in California because I was playing senior league ball. Then we go down to Arizona, and I saw Michael Jordan play in the winter league down there.
That must have been 1995, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, it was. I think that was the last fall I went down there too. Yeah, we went out to one of his games, and he was a good left fielder, but you could see that he would never be able to hit a curveball. Did
you play senior league with Jim Barr out here in California?
Jim Barr, exactly. Lowell, what was his name? Lowell Palmer.
Okay.
He's a pitcher.
Yeah, we played that team the first year of the Senior League World Series in 1988. We played Sacramento, and we played a team from near Sacramento. I'm trying to think of the name of it. Davis. Yeah, I think it was Davis. Maybe it was Davis. And they won it. They beat Jim Barr and Lowell.
Childs there. With the Mets.
I don't remember him. There were a couple other. There were a couple of other big leaguers on the. There weren't. Davis didn't have it. Davis played us in the opening game, and they hit in the first inning alone. They hit 7 triples, and our center fielder came in after. He's almost.
David?
We were on the Bay Area All Stars. I played. I was living in San Francisco then, and that was the first year the Bay Area had a team, and it was actually it was the first year that Steve Sigler ran the Senior League World Series, and he invited he invited teams from the Virgin Islands, and anybody could come, and in later years teams from the Netherlands, teams from Germany, team from Italy, even Russia sent a team one year, so it got to be quite interesting. And I think 95 was the last year I went down there. I was on a team of over 50 team then. He had formed a new division, the over 50 division, and I played in that. He was in that too, Steve, at that time.
I have a goal. I was just like the bat boy in the over 90 league. It wouldn't matter.
It was fun. It was fun. That was my Major League Baseball for whatever it was, and I did get to I never got to bat against Barr or Palmer, but I did get to bat against Chuck Hensley. I don't know if you remember Hensley or not.
Chuck Hensley was a Met pitcher.
No, he played with the Giants. He had a brief sojourn with the Giants. I think in the mid '80s, and he actually had very good numbers for the little bit he pitched with them. And he had a good minor league record. I never understood why he didn't get more of a chance when I asked him about it after I batted against him a couple of times, because he was, without question, the toughest pitcher I ever faced. And that included college. But he was a mature pitcher by that time. And he still had it. It was an over 30 league, and some of us were pretty well over 30. But
and Hensley was the other players that you remember that played in the league that you played?
Well, Terry Whitfield played in the league.
Good.
A guy named Herman Segelke. Herman Segelke played briefly in the majors, and the Chicago team had Rich Nye. Rich Nye wasn't pitching then. He was a pitcher when he was with the Cubs, but he played first base.
NYE. Exotic animal surgeon.
NYE.
Yeah.
And they had a guy who played one game, who was their catcher, who played one game with the Cardinals. I'm trying to remember his name. But Rico Cardi came down there, and there were some very good ball players. But usually the best players were not guys who ever even played professional ball. And they came out of the woodwork. The first year, the over 40 division was won by Davis, and they beat the Sacramento team in the final. And the over 30 division, and Sigler had an over 30 team. He didn't play it. He played in the over 40 team, the New York team. And they expected to come down there and win it. And their very first game, they were playing in an adjacent field to us. And so between innings, I would go over and watch part of their game, and these guys were just moaning and complaining and screaming and saying, "We can't let this team beat us. This team should be a patsy. What are we doing here?" And they lost. And the team they lost to was a team from South Dakota. And that team never came close to losing a single game down there. They beat San Jose in the final 15-0. And these guys, they weren't professional ball players. They played together all their lives. And this was their golden moment to come down to Phoenix and play in the first Senior League World Series, and they won it all. And those South Dakota teams year after year came down, and they always did a good job.
Was there a spring training for this? Because they just your age.
We played pickup ball. You could play year round in San Francisco. So we the teams I played on, we played all winter.
At Rec, where'd you play? At the Rec Diamond?
We played at we played at Big Rec.
Big Rec. Yes.
We played in Marin. We played at what was the field? I can't remember the high school field. San Rafael High School field. We played at, there was a park in San Rafael we played, and we played at Laney Park in Laney in Oakland.
In Oakland? Laney has did you get to meet, what was it, Jethro McIntyre? Was he involved at all?
I don't remember.
He was a big league scout out of Oakland. He used to coach at Laney for a while. Scout on the Major League Scouting Bureau, with the Major League Scouting Bureau, and it was
the only scout I met was in '95 when they were thinking they were going to have to dig up players, because the strike was still on, well into the spring. So a scout came out and he invited anybody from our league who wanted to try out. So I went to the tryouts. I mean, I was not a prospect by any means, and I just went out there to watch. And there were probably 80 or 100 guys who came out, and he had them take a couple throws, take a couple swings, jog around the field a couple grounders, and it was more or less like tryout camps when you'd go to when you were a kid. 200 guys would show up in all kinds of ragtag uniforms, and the guy you least expected to make it would make it. And that was kind of the way it was in this tryout, because he picked a pitcher who didn't really have a good fastball, but he had a lot of stuff, a lot of junk. And he asked this guy, he was in his mid-30s. He asked him what his history was, and he said, I pitched in college, and that was it. And he said, do you have a knuckleball? And the guy said, yeah, I do, but I really don't like to use it much because I don't have anybody who can catch it. So, if I use it even in a senior league game, it's going to end up being a pass ball or a wild pitch. But he said, let me see your knuckler. And so he went behind the plate and caught him. I can't remember the guy's name. He was with Pittsburgh though. Al will love this. He came out, and this was the only guy he was interested in. And I don't know whatever happened. I don't think anything did, because by that time, the replacements were long gone. The season ended up starting late, but these guys never really got any kind of a look after that.
Yeah, those were some bad times in baseball. Just around '95.
It spoiled me forever. I've never been the same ever since the strike closed down the season in '94. Yeah, I really never trusted baseball after that.
If they could do something like that, if they can keep it, that's the one thing about Bud Selig. If they could keep the damn thing going through World War II for the morale of
You're right.
society, America, do that. You couldn't find a way. Nobody could.
This was Landis did it.
Pardon me?
I said it was Landis who did it, who agreed to do it. Yeah, I mean, and Bud Selig couldn't get them to play through the strike. He couldn't.
Right.
They had to go out.
You could
shut
say,
down
hey, look, we'll split it down the middle for Christ's sake. We'll make ourselves rich rather than attorneys. Is what it comes down to. And people like you and others. Now, I have to say, from an early time, I knew. But in 1995, I was so hooked on baseball at that point in my life that I wasn't going to what I called cutting my nose off to spite my face through this. But I was going to keep a major hatred going for a long time. And if they couldn't split the difference, if you're talking about that much money and they have to be greedier, one side greedier than the other, that's bullshit. That was just what it was.
Well, Judge Sonia Sotomayor, who was now on the Supreme Court, was the judge that ordered them back.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and the 1995 season was only 144 games for each team. They lost a couple of weeks.
Well, it cost Matt Williams the home run record.
Yeah, and Gwynn might have hit 400.
Or a run at the home run record. Yeah, he was having a really fine season.
394.
Yeah.
Gwynn. But
94 and 95. Bell hit 50. Albert Bell hit 50 home runs in short.
Won 100 and lost 44 that season.
Yeah.
And
played the other 18 games, who knows how many they would have won. They probably would have. They might have broken. I don't. They wouldn't have broken the record. I think Seattle, still they wouldn't have approached Seattle, but they would have broken their own team record of 111.
If Bell wasn't such a head case, and if Alomar didn't spit in that umpire's face, Honachek, I think, then that Cleveland team.
It was John Hirschbeck.
Well, but he was with Baltimore then when he did
John
that.
Hirschbeck.
Yeah, but still,
and it was.
When you look back upon the team and you start counting off names, you go Alomar, and that has to come to mind wherever he was, because
he had come over. He came over to Cleveland when they were still good in the latter part of the 90s.
That was a good team that had Teddy Lofton on it. That was a man.
Lofton. But this goes back to the All-Star game, because if it were not for the All-Star game giving home field advantage to the winning team, the winning that league, Cleveland still would never have hosted the first game of a World Series.
Yeah,
this was the first they ever hosted the first game of a World Series.
Well,
and without the All-Star game, they probably wouldn't have had it.
We had the alternating the alternating leagues in both 1987 and 1991. The Twins, who had the inferior record, won all 4 games in both World Series because it was the American League's turn to have the home field. They alternated, for a long time.
Hey, Alan, tell us about the meeting that you have a SABR meeting in New York.
It's coming in New York the last weekend in June. It's going to be at some hotel near Grand Central Station. And I guess things are, when we had it in 1991 here, and the local ran it, and I was very heavily involved with that. The best thing that came out of that particular national was I met David.
That's right.
But now the national runs it, and the local doesn't do very much. So we're waiting to see where it is and how much it's going to cost, and all the bells and whistles.
Beautiful.
But I was very surprised because we went through so many problems when we had it here 25 years ago that none of us who worked that would ever thought there would be another one here.
Really?
Yeah, we went through. We were supposed to have a tour of Yankee Stadium, and the Yankees decide to give the weekend to the Jehovah's Witnesses. There are a lot of things that went wrong with that convention. And
that was the first one I ever went.
Yeah.
I had no idea what was going on behind the scenes. I was pretty green about the whole thing.
Yeah, and when Steve Vadell, who a close friend of mine, who was the primary, one behind the scenes, told me that David was coming, and he told a mutual friend of ours, Scott Flato, that David was coming. And I was aware of David's books because I had them, the first two books that came out in the 70s, and we both got extremely excited.
Right.
So
speaking of Jehovah's Witnesses, that wouldn't have happened in today's age, because today there's something called the Jehovah's Witness Protection Program, where they will move you around and make it okay.
Yeah,
those days you were subject to whatever it was. But that's interesting how the Yankees would work. They're going to get a major group of folks, or that's big business.
Yeah, and we wound up going to a Met game, sitting in the upper deck, and it was a Friday night. And Friday night, you don't want to go to games because that's when all the drunks come out.
Oh.
Because it was a very bad experience. So anything that in that convention, anything that could go wrong went wrong, and so we never thought they put it here again. But I guess the powers that be decided. I also want to tell David that I used another line of his. Somebody, one of the groups I'm in, put up a picture of Gil Hodges and Duke Snider as teammates on the 1963 Mets. They were teammates for about a month and a half before Gil went to manage Washington. And so I put down fancy meeting you here, which is a category that David used in several of his books. Where players, who are known for being teammates on one team, playing, on another team later on. For
a week or two, sometimes. Yeah.
David, I can't tell you how cool this is. We are going to shut it down. We're segmenting it, and this will be out within the week. We'll post it, and can you find a way of getting me your email so I could? You want it now, or you want it when you get off? Tell people how to get in touch with you, just in case they like this.
You don't want the audience knowing it. You have to keep that private.
Okay, well then we'll say after we shut down.
I'll sign off, and then you can discuss it offline.
Yeah, we'll be discussing it. That's because what we do.
Okay, I'll do the 5 sign right now.
This has been a great episode.
It's been a pleasure for me once again, and Al, I really enjoyed.
If you're enjoying it, we're enjoying it. Nothing Alan and I like to do better than talk ball. I thank you for including me. It's a fun way to spend a couple of hours, or an hour in this case.
It's a dreary day here anyway.
It is.
Geez. No, if it were sunny and beautiful, it would be a wonderful way to spend the day.
Right,
guys.
You're right.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
See you next week.
Okay.
Same time, same bat station.
Okay.
We'll do it the same way.
All right, let me sign off, and then you can exchange what you have to talk about.
We will do that.
Okay.
All right, hang in there, and